Hello and welcome to another episode of Getting Started.Life on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. Our show is about starting new things, how to do it, 5 steps on how to do it right, and one mistake to avoid. And today we are talking about dating after divorce. And I'm excited about this because I haven't dated in well over 20 years and I've never been divorced. So this is going to be very informative to me. So without further ado, our guest today is Sue Priver. Now, you're an executive coach sort of by career, correct?
Absolutely. So I'm a world record holding power lifter after becoming an accidental midlife athlete. And so combining my background in business librarianship and other librarianship with athletic endeavors to get to that world-class level, have started several years ago at this point in time, coaching with businessmen and executives to implement what I've been successful with at the gym as well as in business into their personal lives.
Wow. And did I see you were a Wolverine?
I am.
There you go. I grew up in Michigan, so I saw that as a school already. So what about your background? Like, how does that connect to the dating piece? Marya and I were talking a little bit about it in the past, but before this, and I'm just interested to hear this.
Sure. So I've had my own personal journey in dating, starting with some health issues that I ran into as a teenager with endometriosis and some other physical challenges, which really impacted my dating life and put a lot of things on hold. And in my 30s, really dug deep into that of, is this something that can really hold me back, or can I have a normal, regular life with a life partner of someone whom I'm choosing? And so I navigated through that over the last many years and really used the same business and athletic game plan to figure out how to date, how to find a life partner, how to be in a happy relationship and be successful in my personal life.
Now, do any of your coaching clients, do you like help them with this kind of stuff? Because I'm guessing, a lot of people who are driven in business, their family life suffers and they end up going through a divorce and then they're back out there. Do you coach a lot of your folks with that?
That's exactly my ideal client, as well as those who've put their dating life on the side. Yep. While they've had a very successful business career. They've gotten to a certain point in life where they're like, okay, my business is running okay. Everything's cool with that. I'm ready to really devote my personal time and resources into finding that really deeply intimate relationship with a life partner.
Wow. And were you going to say something, Marya?
I was I know a lot of women who've done that, especially who just kind of really steam forward and then end up, wanting to date. And then it's like, oh gosh, to enter the dating pool at 30 or 35 or 45 is like very different than meeting people on campus when we were all in college, right? And it just kind of happened more organically.
Exactly. It's definitely something that you need to decide that this is something that you want. And so for me, that's step one, is really making that decision that this is important to you at this point in life. And I'm going to put time, energy, and resources into it. And then really create that vision of what does having a partner in life mean? At this point in time, if you've been single for 40 something years, do you want to live with someone or not? There's no right answer. It's just, what do you want? And then step 3 is having that certainty that person.
Because I want to go back to a couple of the steps in the beginning. Sure. So just deciding that you want to do it, like in the context of divorce, and Marya, I mean, you probably got more experience just dealing with divorce clients and things. You've done it longer than I have. A lot of them, to decide to do it, this step 1, there's a lot more to it than I would guess, like someone who's been single throughout their life.
Actually, no. If you've been single, this is a big shift and a big deal. I mean, I have lived by myself for 20 something years. For me, I'm not living with my partner. That's a choice we've made together at this time. We might change our minds, but it's a really big shift in perspective to have a partner, not to do everything by myself and for myself. And so I can really understand it's both obviously different stages in life and different experiences, but it's, if you want someone in your life as an intimate life partner, you need to be committed to that and really make that decision to make it happen.
How do you know you're ready? Like when people are like, on the fence going, I think I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready. How do you know?
Most people aren't ever 100% certain. And really the first stages that I work with people is really on themselves and deciding what they want, and then take that question and turn it around.
Yep.
Take this person. So for me, had been and am seeking a man who is my life partner. And so it's this is a vision of who he is in my life. Who is he seeking?
Yeah.
And is there anything in me that I can make better and develop to be advantageous and somebody that he is seeking? I'm not saying become someone I'm not, or, gloss over things, but if, my communication skills could need an upgrade because that will benefit me and him as well in relationship, that's what I'm going to focus on right now. He might want to reorganize his home and really clear out the clutter and get ready for someone else to join him in his home. So it's all different pieces at the beginning to see if now is the time.
So let me ask a follow-on question with that, because I think, especially in the context of divorce, deciding to do it, it's almost the why. Why are you doing it, right? At the same time. So I'm guessing in some circumstances, like you're talking about, been alone, and then now you want something different. But for people who are getting a divorce, my guess is, am I doing it to immediately replace what was there, or am I actually dating for a reason other than that, right? So talk a little bit about the why, if you could, because I think that's almost the important part. That inventory is important before, it sounds like.
Exactly. And my clients specifically are looking for that intimate long-term partnership relationship. That's only one aspect of dating, put it that way.
Sure.
Other people, are seeking a more casual relationship, to fulfill themselves sexually, to have some fun, to go out socially. It may not be to combine households. It may not be to really have that partnership. And sometimes when you have young kids, or, you're at different ages and stages in life, you're not necessarily seeking that next marriage relationship or long-term partnership. So that vision is really important to figure out, what do you want now? Do you just want some casual dating to go out? It's sort of like more of a friends with benefits kind of situation, or do you want a partnership? And neither's wrong. And the key is to really get clear on what you want and seek that person.
Now, with that though, how would you coach people to get past? So let's say you've been in a long-term relationship and all of a sudden you're back out there. And if I look at when I last dated versus now, the whole hookup cultures, everything has changed a lot, right? So how do these people, if they decide that they do want to date, if one of the directions, one, they might not even know about, but two, is a little bit stigmatized to them, how do you get past that to date for the right reason?
So I think of everything with a business lens. And so when you're dating, you are the person that you're selling. So you need to advertise and market and promote in the right places, in the right way, using the right language for what you want. If there are different dating sites for different avenues. So if you're more interested in a long-term partnership, then you get on different dating sites that promote that. When you talk with your friends and family and say, now's my time. This is the kind of person I'm looking for. Do you know anybody else who's seeking someone like me? And ask and really get clear on who it is that you're seeking and what you want, and then where those people hang out. It may be a certain gym that's close to you. It may be some cultural center or music, or some other interest group that you're both interested in.
And I think The interesting part to me, and I'm thinking about this from the divorce lens too, right? Because that's kind of what I do all the time, is it's so much more intentional, I think, as adults, right? I have some good friends who are single in their 40s, and I think it takes 15 minutes, and they're like, meh, like you just know, or like you know what you're looking for more, you know how to communicate that better, right? None of us probably did our best communicating when we were 18. And the intention behind it is just so interesting. But I think, especially to divorce, taking the time after that divorce, whether that's 3 months or 3 years, to be able to be as intentional as you're talking about, to be able to articulate, this is what I'm looking for, and this is what I bring to the table.
Right.
So now that was
one of the factors as well is, what are your values? What is so important to you in life that you are not going to compromise? And later in life, there are more of those, and they're more clear because we're more settled in who we are, what's important to us, what our priorities are, and seeking someone whose values mesh with ours.
So that was step one, and it sounds like there's a lot to it, right? Like there's deciding that you want to do it, but there's the research of before you deciding that you want to do it, figuring out the why. So what next? Someone's decided they want to do it. What should they do? And even if they're not looking for long-term relationship, it sounds like there is a deliberate next to.
Yeah. So that next step is really figuring out, what do you want? What kind of relationship is it? Who is that person or people? If you don't want just one, you want to date multiple people. And how does that fit into your life? Do you have time? Are there things you're going to give up? Just that whole, what does it feel like? What does it look like? Do you travel together? Do you just spend one evening a week together? Is there long-term potential? Do you have kids? Does that person have kids? How do the kids fit together? Do the kids meet your person or not? There are no right answers to this except for what you truly desire.
So it sounds like there's a lot of interconnection between 1 and 2 in both directions, right? So you're saying after someone's like, all right, I'm going to get out there, where is there?
Right.
Is kind of what I'm saying. So even if it sounds like you were talking about a lot of questions about long term, if they're like, well, hey, my there is 18 months of bacchanalia, then it sounds like it's a different inventory. But what recommendations would you have for someone with that? Again, we were talking a little earlier about sort of maybe a self-stigmatization, but I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff, because all of the what's okay and what's not okay changes a lot. And in that type of environment, my guess is it's a little bit more influential.
Yes. And there's also the element of self-confidence and body image, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship, if you've been divorced or, in some other partnership for a very long time and haven't dated anybody else in many, many years, and your body has changed, and, it can be a lesser confident situation to actually be with somebody new and literally be naked with them, like both physically and emotionally. And that's something that needs to be addressed if you want that to happen. And that's one of the mindset pieces that I do work with people on, is identifying their limiting beliefs, what's holding them back, and then working through it in various ways, depending on what their individual issues are, to gain that confidence, to accept themselves and be comfortable with someone else, especially with somebody new.
So is that like a step, maybe a step 3, or is that like a sub-step of sort of, it does sound like you've got like that athletic thinking, like where are you now? Where do you want to be? Right. It could be body acceptance. It could be, hey, you know what? Like, I've let myself go. I need to fix some stuff. So is that like a step, or is that still part of another one?
That's the next step. So we're kind of leading into that third stage.
And could talk a little bit about the third stage.
Sure. So the first stage is just literally saying, now's the time. Like, I am all in. I am ready. This is going to happen. Step 2 is that vision. It's what direction am I headed in? What do I want? What would success look like? So I know when I get there what it is. So it's setting that goal. Then the third step is that certainty that this can exist for me, and getting rid of anything that's going to get in my way of achieving it.
Okay, so I know you're going to step 4, but I want to hold off and talk a little bit about
No, I was going to say a little more about 3, but yes.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm sorry, because I didn't want to outrun the show here. We got to have good stuff in the second half.
Absolutely. So step 3, it's really about oneself, and it can happen concurrently with dating, because you might not know that you have something holding you back until you meet someone and you go on a date and all these things run through your head and it's like, oh, or you get to that stage where it's a more intimate stage and things don't work right or the way you plan them. And so that's when, you can revisit this area of really, what are the limits in your life? Which ones are you choosing? Say, personally, I don't want to have children. And that's a limit I've chosen for myself. And whomever I'm with and whomever I've dated in the past, I've made that very clear. And, that's my choice. So then, that's a fine limit. Anything that you're choosing, that's awesome. There are limits that we have grown up with and have received culturally that may or may not be serving us anymore. And so that's one of the big things I do go over with clients is, why are you choosing that? Have you chosen it, or is it something that you just believe you have to have or have to want?
I think that's huge, because especially if you get married in your 20s, right? Even if it's your late 20s, you probably met somewhere around college. And in that age group, a lot of us are just going along. We meet someone, you get married, you buy a house, you start a family, you work on your careers, like it's right? But when you're 40 and dating, you really get to define it differently. And I think that would be scary for a lot of people, right? Even just when you say like that you chose not to have kids, there's a stigma attached to that. And it probably took you a while to be like, yeah, no, I'm cool with this. This is my decision. It is what it is. And even if it's, I want to date multiple people, or, I want to date someone of the same sex or opposite sex, if that's not what you have been with, making those decisions have got to be really hard later.
Yeah. And also for a lot of people, even if you are seeking a long-term partnership, if you say, I'm not sure I want to get married.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh, that means you're not serious, you're not committed. And I'm just like,
that could be a plus.
Absolutely. But there's a stigma around that and a conversation to be had where it's, oh, you don't want to get married, you don't want to commit to me, you don't want that long-term partnership, you're going to bail at the first issue. And I'm like, no, I just don't need the legal document. I don't have any kids. You don't have any kids. We can put other things in place legally. It doesn't, we don't need that necessarily.
And we recognize domestic partnerships now in this country. So for insurance purposes, beneficiary, like for a lot of legal purposes, we don't need to be married anymore.
Exactly. And so that's a conversation to be had. And it is a big stigma for some people, oh, you don't want to be married? I'm like, well, it's not that. I don't have to be married. So therefore, we need to have that conversation.
Well, and so going like marriage way down the road, obviously for like someone who's just deciding to date, and I think of it more in the divorce situation than others, but everybody's got those friends who get divorced and then they show up with whoever they're dating, and you're like, oh, that's like the same person. They were grown in the same pod as you, and then like you see sometimes 3 and 4 times. Now with that, my question is, because then this is a self-inventory thing that you're talking about as well, is how much of that is, well, that's what I really like, or that's what I'm used to, and not exploring what they might really like later, like where they're at that time.
That's a lot of it, is people being in patterns and picking very similar people to date and partners, and not necessarily serving themselves well or growing personally.
So I want to take a minute on that after we take a break, because we got, I think, 2 more steps and then the mistake. But there's one question I want to ask that. So we're going to go to a couple quick commercials, and then we'll be right back. All right, and we are back. You are listening to Getting Started.Life on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. And for those just joining us, our guest today is Sue Priver, and we're talking about dating after divorce. She's an executive coach and has a lot of experience in coaching people along in the new dating experience. And before the break, we were talking about people picking the same type that they may have been with in the past, especially with divorce. What's up?
Sorry, I'm muted. When we were doing a Split Ready podcast, I don't know if you remember this, Doug, we were talking about people getting multiple divorces. And you were like, well, no, wouldn't people figure out the issues in the first divorce and then make different decisions and make their changes in the second relationship? And I think it was me and a divorce attorney, and we both just started laughing because people just don't, unless they put in some work. They do the same behavior patterns, look for the same type of people. Looks like our guest froze.
I know she froze, but I got a question for you about that though, because before we lost her, she was talking about those both being particular reasons, right? Step 3.
Yep.
And then that occurred to me. It's like, how do you though coach somebody, or how can somebody self-determine whether they're making the right choice, right? Because if they're entering into that cycle, then it might not be the right cycle. So they've got to deal with more baggage, it seems, than maybe someone who hasn't dated before.
You know, there's different ways to go about it, right? So my husband and I joke that if something ever happened to one of us, like, I'm never getting married again. I'm going to be single and live by myself, and it's going to be amazing. And my husband would be married again immediately, right? Like, he just likes to be married. And so It's just, people are different. But I think you have to take the time to kind of figure that out. And I think when you're not following that marriage, house, family, job track that we follow in our 20s, and you can date for whatever reason is important to you, it opens up the world of dating in a different way.
Well, and I got to say, like, this is a good part for me, because my wife ever did have to date, like if I died or something, she's never going to find something like this again. Never. You know, there's going to be no type.
Would she repeat?
Broken. What's that?
So the question is, would she repeat the same behavior pattern and look for someone like you?
In the absence of our guest, let's come up. You're more expensive. So I'm going to bring the interview to you. So someone's decided they want to date. They figured out the why. Now they're doing that self-inventory, figuring out the reality of things. So, what would you say would be step 4?
I'm guessing that she was going to say step 4 would be because she was talking about the business lens, right? Mm-hmm. And putting yourself out intentionally and putting yourself in places with the right language that reflect what you're looking for. There are a million different websites, right? There's Tinder, there's eHarmony, and those are very different things. Would you join a group and, do they still do speed dating? I don't even know, because you and I both haven't dated in a very long time.
And they didn't even have speed dating when I started dating. Like, and then I got married. 25 people. They didn't. Maybe they did, but I never did it. But no, that makes sense. So you're saying, is it the how?
Probably, yeah. Like, how are you going to, you figured out you want to fish. How are you going to fish? Where are you going to go? What kind of bait are you going to use, right? Not to use necessarily too much of a fishing analogy, but if you're going to do it, you got to figure out the actual how you're going to do it.
Is that too mechanical, though? Does that take all the spontaneity out of it?
I think there is a little lack of spontaneity when you're dating intentionally in your 30s and 40s. I have friends who are single, and they're not going to waste their time on
Yeah, but see that this is now, like, like when I moved to Chicago, right? I moved from Colorado, and I'm looking for a house. All the houses in Colorado had attached garages, right? And in Chicago, I told my realtor, like, I no matter what, I want an attached garage. And that's when I moved to Oak Park, and there basically are minimal houses, especially in Starter. So where I'm getting at with that really long analogy is by being too deliberate and too, lockstep, and as we're talking about 5 steps, but are you potentially taking so much off the market that you may miss out because you think that one thing is a non-starter?
I think that's possible, but in real estate, people kind of do the same thing, right? They come in there with their list of what they want in a new home, and we know that you're not going to get everything you want. You got to figure out the difference between your wants and your needs, right?
Right.
And so I think it's probably the same thing in dating. If you don't want to have kids, that's a need. Like that's a hard line that you're probably not going to want to change. Not that you couldn't, but you probably won't if you've made that decision. If you don't want to cohabitate, I think that sounds amazing. Dating but not cohabitating, like that would be so.
Well, I was completely unrelated to dating. I've read like articles about like really happy marriages. Sometimes this might be a whole nother show. Like they just sleep in different beds, and it's not because it's more like, you know, the old school, like, hey, I could get a nice sleep and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So no, it totally makes sense. So like new arrangements would make sense for people.
Yeah, and I think that depends too. I mean, I have a bed that I sleep in sometimes just because I'm an insomniac, and my husband goes to work early, and I will drive him nuts puttering around the bedroom and being up all night if we're in the same room. So I just go putter and fuss somewhere else.
Now, so here's my question on the how then, right? Because the question, all the information's out there, right? But there's a, you know, if you're, let's say you're older and you got kids and you're like, now you're on the market. Do you go to your kids and say, hey, what are people using these days? And that could be very, in a divorce situation, especially, all of a sudden it's like, hey, Pops is out there going, you know, or
it depends on the age of your kids, don't you think?
What's that?
It depends on the age of your kids, don't you think? Like if you went to your daughter and had that conversation.
I'm saying if you're older, right? If it's sort of a gray divorce situation right after high school, you know, or right, yeah, then they divorce right after high school. But you know, when finding out these things, do you go online or do you go to like a friend and say, hey, do you know what I mean? Like someone who can kind of guide you through that.
I think it depends on the person, right? Like you're a very extroverted person. You can walk into a room and network and chit chat with everyone and be very comfortable doing that. I prefer to have one or two more important conversations because I don't want to talk to everyone in the room. So how you might approach it would be very different than I would approach it, right? I would probably want to scroll through 27 people online and pick the one person I want to eat. And you might want to be in a room full of fish and be like, I'm going to talk to all these fish and see which one, you know, I like.
So then for you, are you saying like if you were back out in that dating world, you would go straight to like a platform and take the spontaneity out of it?
If I was looking for a relationship, yes. Yes. If I was looking outside.
Oh, we got Sue back.
Yeah, if I was looking to kill some time and had some physical needs that needed to be met, I may not be looking at the same thing. So it just depends.
Sue is back. So we came up with our own number 4. So Marya, what was our number 4?
We said that your number 4 was probably, because you mentioned a business lens, figuring out in what way and where to market yourself. Like, how are you going to get back out there? Are you going to go on Tinder? Are you going to go on eHarmony? Are you going to go to like speed dating or go through your friends? Like, what would make sense for you?
Hey, and why do you keep leaving farmersonly.com off that list?
Yes, well.
So were we accurate on that one, Sue?
Absolutely. Step number 4 is a plan.
Yes.
All right. See that? That's why we have this show. So now you figured out that you want to date. You figured out why you want to date. You figured out kind of what you're looking for. You've got that plan. What's a number 5 for someone?
Take action.
Yeah, that's the hard one, isn't it?
Yeah, no,
Yes.
you know what? It sounds simple. And it's that old simple, not easy that my sensei always say, it's simple, but it's not easy. And that's totally true. So with that, talk a little bit about like, okay, stage fright kind of thing, right? You don't want to step out there and do that and have anything happen.
Absolutely. I mean, it can be terrifying to date for the first time in decades.
Yeah.
Or to date in a very different manner than ever before, to get online, to put yourself out there. You know, what would your friends say? What would coworkers say if they happened to run across your profile? You know, that kind of thing.
I didn't even think of that one.
Yeah.
I think Doug knows this, but I suffer from paralysis from analysis, right? Like I will do all of the research in the world, but sometimes the taking action is the hard part. And I can definitely imagine that would be because there's a lot on the line, right? It takes a lot of confidence and gumption to get back out there. Because if you've been divorced, you've been kicked pretty hard. Like it's a painful, difficult process. So
Yeah,
out there
it definitely can be. And then it's what's the next best step, and just do that. You know, is it talking with a close friend and just announcing, you know, I'm ready to start dating again. This is the kind of person I'm looking for. Do you know anybody? That can be huge.
Forward progress.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead, Marya.
I would say forward progress. Any little step forward is forward progress.
Absolutely. And who do you trust? You don't have to post this on Facebook and, you know, to your entire world saying, you know, who do you know I'm ready to date?
I'm ready.
You
But
can.
when they start dating,
Doesn't
man, you
hurt.
see it everywhere. It's all over the place. So
Exactly.
So for people though who have that anxiety, right? Because sometimes that they've done step 1 through 4, and 5's the important one, right? 5's the extra point that wins the game. How do you overcome that? I'm guessing fear of rejection, all that kind of stuff. But I'm sure there's people who go, "Wow, that's what it's like." I'm going headlong, into it to try all the new stuff. But I'm sure there's more people who are like terrified.
Absolutely. Well, a therapist, a coach, it depends on what the issues are and what the needs are. Sometimes it's just a strategy to take one step. So for me, I really focus on performance coaches, some of my mentors, some of the things I've done in the past, you know, to be successful on stage, and ask them, you know, what have you done in life before something challenging? You know, if they're a salesperson, what is your routine to make cold calls, to go into a presentation that's super important? Do you do some deep breaths or some very specific thing to de-stress yourself a little bit and to get back in the present moment? Most of us have these techniques that we use for something, but we don't think about what they really are because they're not conscious, and then how to leverage them in other situations.
Very cool. So now that they've done all this, right, and they may or may not execute it well the first time, and I'm sure that there's the back through the cycle of reevaluation, but what is the biggest mistake? And again, this could be any kind of dating. I think a lot of our conversation has been about dating somebody with the intent of long term, but my guess is that, that because I think we all see it through that lens, but if you're out there doing all kinds of crazy stuff too, there's other mistakes. What would you say is the biggest mistake someone can make?
There are two different things that have been running through my mind on this. So I'm going to go with one, and it's...
You can cover both as long as we have time. Keep going.
So the first big mistake I see people making is jumping in, not knowing what they want, not knowing who they're seeking, and burning out, you know, of just, there's no person for me. You know, I've done all this dating.
Thinking of the housing market right now, you've just described the housing market, so I totally get it. So keep going.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of energy and effort going in circles and spinning your wheels and just feeling defeated because you don't know what it means to be successful. And if you're not heading in a direction of success, it's less likely you'll get there because you won't even recognize it if it happens most of the time. And then the other thing is really feeling like dating is its own thing and that you don't have any skills and you're a total newbie all over again. And that's not necessarily the case. So what I like to do is talk with people and say, what made you successful in business? Why are you a good friend? You know, what are your skills and what have you already acquired in life? And usually, especially if it's someone who's divorced, there's a reason they got together with that person in the first place. And usually there's something good that has happened in the past. No matter how horrible the relationship winds up at the end, there's usually something at the beginning, in the middle, that they can really look back on and say, yeah, those were some really good skills that I acquired. You know, my communication is great, or I was really there for them during this crisis, or something like that. And then to really rethink those skills and put them together for dating.
I like that because a lot of us grow in our marriages, right? Like, hopefully we're growing as people and, learning new skills. We're not the same person we were 10, 20 years ago. But I think also you can reflect on what led to your divorce in terms of what needs weren't met. When push came to shove, there was a need that you had that wasn't getting met. What was it? And how do you, make sure that you get that met in future relationships?
Exactly.
So, but I don't know, but what strikes me about what both of you said was how compartmentalized it really makes things, right? So as I'm thinking about this, I'm like, hey, if I were ever getting divorced or something happened to my spouse, would I then pick a hobby and go in that direction and bring all that together? But that sort of veers away a little bit from where you guys are really talking about this really strict inventory.
Well, if you know whom you're seeking, you can find that person anywhere. So say you are like, yeah, I want someone for a long-term partnership who has overlapping activities with me and lives near me. And, our values of X, Y, and Z are top, family, I don't know, whatever your top core values are. And then you just allow life to happen. You do some dating, you do some hiking, you do some, meeting friends of friends at parties and different people at big work events. And that person, if they're on your radar, you'll recognize them.
Makes great sense.
Irony,
Go ahead.
I was say the irony is not lost, Doug, that the first thing that you would do is start a new hobby.
Yeah, there you go. Like a podcast, for instance. So
yeah, the irony is not lost on that one.
Great conversation today. I really want to thank our guest, Sue Priver, executive coach, world-class athlete, and expert on dating. Sue, if someone wants to get a hold of you, I'm sure it would be more in the coaching arena. What's the best way? And remember, this is video here, but it's also audio. So make sure you tell them where they can get a hold of you.
Sure. So if you just go to my website, which is SuePriver.com. So it's S as in Sam, UE, P as in Peter, R I, V as in Victor, ER.com. And then right on the front screen, you can click and work with me and set up a free strategy session. It's a winning game plan strategy session. You get access directly to my calendar, set up a time, and we can talk. And I'm happy to help you out, get focused, set up a winning game plan, and see if I'm the right person to guide and mentor you through the process.
That's awesome. So you've been listening to Getting Started.Life on the WGSN-DB Solo Network. We record every other Tuesday. And if you've got something you want to talk about, you want to help somebody the way Sue has today, get hold of us. Tell us what you want to talk about. Hopefully we'll get you on. If there's something you want to find out about, get hold of us too, because then we can find people like Sue who can enlighten you to what you need and what you need to do to start something new. So thanks very much, and we'll talk to you next time.